This is another edition of the reading club. Essentially, this is a reading group, and we continue reading the short novel by Honoré de Balzac, The Sign of the Cat and Racket, and essentially we proceed to the next paragraphs. And essentially, this is once again a very slow gaze of the narrative, which essentially, well, it draws on the contours of the building. It is a very lingering prose. It is not like a very quick, action-driven narrative, and we come to know that this is a very old shop house, a decrepit one, and that essentially there is a comparison. Balzac draws a comparison between the house and an old duchess, basically at the time, and maybe even now, I'm not sure about that. The usage of the beauty instruments by women could be rather late, and once again I don't think much has changed over the last years. But what the author draws attention to is that laid rouge of the time, the cosmetics or whatever, the beauty industry would be using also thick layers of on the faces of I guess grand dames of the time, and it would be something of a stable idiosyncratic expression at the time. Right now it makes little sense and could be seen as whatnot, but still there is something of a reference to the effort by the shop house to make it pretty, or let's say very pretty at the time, and then as time passes by it becomes let's say a very old structure, and we kind of see that efforts to make it more aesthetically appealing. And once again, in the focus of the narrative, once again there is the painting that essentially has given the name to the short novel about a cat playing rackets. And once again, I've got not exactly a great idea what the game of rackets would be. It brings to my mind the game of tennis on the one hand, and one can think about padel in Spain. Once again, I'm not sure if this is exactly the same or whatnot, and I understand there are more modern variations on even the game of tennis. And once again, this is something about the whole history of tennis, maybe as a side narrative to this video and podcast, because it's essentially even at the time of the narrative, which is early 19th century, there was something unnatural about a cat playing with a racket. And we can only think about even recent Netflix series on tennis, or let's say, or Amazon Prime Video films on tennis, where the racket would be such a center of a lot of attention, and something similar must have been playing out in this scene, where picture picture of a cat, upright cat, holding a racket in its paws would be so comical, and I kind of think it is still comical. It would still be comical to the present day observer, and then we have a certain sense of a detachment on the narrator's part. Once again, a cat in a coat, which would be, I think, a very transparent reference to one of the more famous fairy tales about a cat in boots, or something like that. Something of the anthropomorphic representation of animals, and then And then on the other hand, there is of course something grotesque, once again, even by the standards of that time, of a cat playing racket, which would be probably in the realm of a metaphor, basically, or a fantasy, and one have to also think that it was something about the advertisement aspect of the picture that is also later deconstructed in the novel itself. Basically, we have that sense of of the heraldry, also as part of the picture, as it would be, as the picture of the cat with the racket being part of the representation of the trademark behind the shop, behind the age-old shop, even at the time of writing. And then once again, there is that sense of that artifice. Once again, the writer, the narrator, and we're not quite sure who the narrator is. As it is the flow of the narrative, which is not necessarily ascribed to the character, to the male character, the observer in the story. And I think that it seems that the author, Honoré de Balzac, is actually is being a voice-over, kind of an all-known voice-over in the narrative. And it is that sense of he is actually reflecting on the Paris shops and how they are using the visual elements in their decor, in the exterior decor, to draw shoppers into them. And there is a sense of the artifice and also humbug. The translator uses the word humbug, and it is a bit of a dated term, and I think that even in the present day, one is still kind of hard pressed to think of a better expression of, let's say, pulling wool over the eyes or something like that. And it was, and I think every advertisement, even one thinks of let's say a corner store, so even as part of a larger chain, etc., they would also be using advertisement, and they will be updating those. There's that sense of the contrast in between the modern world, which always tries to make its imagery very similar on the one hand, and also up to date on the other hand, as opposed to the attitude of the yesteryear, of the yestercentury. And it seems that this is something of the exotic aspect of the Paris history that also Honoré de Balzac is dealing with, as he kind of reflects on the strange shop names, on the strange devices such as animals in cages, which were used by shops at that time, or maybe even in the centuries preceding that, to draw customers into, as once again one is not quite sure to what extent Paris in the early 19th century was actually a modern economy or modern society where one would be having a complete separation in between the production and consumption. And I think that it is very possible that many households in Paris would be only in part engaging in the trade of goods, for services, etc. Maybe a lot of things were done in-house, literally, and it could be that those shops which were lining the streets of Paris would be trying to appeal to maybe the audience which is a cut above, so that it would be something to the clientele which would be looking for something not done in house. And I think that even for the well-to-do, houses, especially if they would have servants, etc., which essentially by definition means that they will be, let's say, doing a lot of cooking in house, a lot of chores, a lot of the activities would be done in a house at the time, even by the poorer households. And it seems that the shops that are out there, their challenge would be that they are selling something that is not actually speaking to the everyday needs of the people on the streets, and there could be that sense that there is that the carnival role. Imagery, carnival role. There is something of a circus going on in Paris at the time, and I think that we underestimate maybe how basic the Paris economy would be at the time, or let's say how long had it actually taken France as a country, which is a rural, underdeveloped country at the time, as opposed to maybe to even Britain. To the German city-states, to the United States as a rising economy at the time, so that even Paris would be in the throes of being modernized slowly, step by step, and one would be probably shocked to realize how relatively primitive the everyday life in Paris was. Once again, we have those very up-to-date how shall I put it, fictionalized representation of Paris, let's say Emily in Paris, etc., which would still be actually pointing their fingers to the ways in which Paris is still, let's say, not on a par with the maybe United States or other cities or countries, so that there is that sense of the uneasy relationship between Paris on the one hand and progress on the other hand, and the narrative of Balzac is actually even more historically attuned in its own time, so that it would be drawing attention to differences that one could spot between what was known at the time of the 15th century Paris, and as opposed to the contemporary condition of Paris in the early 19th century, after all of the changes it has already gone through, and maybe in anticipation of the changes to come. And one should probably not underestimate the role of writers at the time, so that I think that in terms of the emerging public sphere, emerging public opinion, say in many European states, and especially in the capital cities, which will be on the cutting edge of many developments at the time, and writers, given that they were earning the upkeep through those serialized novels, through what they were able to sell to the reading public as their primary market, and it will be mostly bourgeois households. It will be in part a female audience, in part up-and-coming bourgeoisie, and also maybe aristocracy, if you think about France, and then if you think about other cities, other countries, international or in Europe, where, let's say, French would be spoken or tried, and where the translations of the leading works literature would be brought to, such as into Britain, and we should not forget that the translation we are reading is into English done or maybe redone by the late 19th century, so that Honoré de Balzac would be speaking primarily to the local audience or maybe Francophone audience in Europe, which could be broader than one could assume, as I understand that a lot of aristocracy in Germany, in Russia, in Poland would be speaking French as their maybe default language, after all, so that there is a sense of a larger work. We are, let's say, here in first stanzas, let's say first bars of a musical opus magnum both in terms of the larger ambition of Honoré de Balzac to write about everyday life from a very learned, from the elaborate point of view, and also in terms of the shorter novel we are doing first steps into.